Was standing in my own kitchen, holding a casserole dish I had spent 2 hours making, when my daughter told me I was no longer welcome at Thanksgiving. Not in those words. She never used plain words. That was always her gift. Mom, she said, leaning against the counter with her arms folded the way she did when she had already decided something. Garrett and I talked, and we think this year it would be better if you celebrated separately. We're doing something more intimate. Curated, you know. Curated. I turned the word over in my mind, the way you turn a stone over to see what lives underneath it. My daughter had used my dining room table for 7 Thanksgivings. She had used my good china, my grandmother's linen napkins, my standing mixer, and for the last 4 years, my credit card to cover the groceries, the wine, the centerpieces she ordered from a florist in Nashville who charged $40 per stem. Curated. I see, I said, because I did not trust myself to say anything else. She smiled the way people smile when they believe they have been kind. Then she glanced at her phone, said she had to run, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving the door slightly open behind her the way she always did, as though closing it fully would have required more consideration of me than she was willing to offer. I set the casserole on the counter. The sweet potato filling had gone warm and soft, the way good things do when they are ignored too long. I stood there for a moment, looking at it. Then I looked around my kitchen. The grout between the tiles was cracked in 2 places. I kept meaning to fix. The overhead light flickered every time the refrigerator hummed. The dish towels were frayed at the edges, and I could not remember when I had last bought new ones. I had not bought new ones because every time I had a little extra, something came up. The car registration fee my daughter forgot to pay, the water bill at her house that ran high because the dishwasher leaked, the gymnastics enrollment from my granddaughter that my son-in-law said they would cover and then quietly did not. I was 63 years old. I had worked 31 years as a licensed practical nurse in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I was spending my retirement making sure my daughter's life ran smoothly while my own kitchen ceiling fan wobbled every time the wind picked up. That night, I did not cry. I sat at my kitchen table after the last light outside went thin and gray, and I opened the accordion folder I kept in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. The folder was green, and I had labeled it in black marker, Household. It held every receipt, every automatic payment confirmation, every bank statement going back 4 years. I spread the papers across the table and began adding. By midnight, I had the number. 87. 87 recurring payments, fees, subscriptions, and direct transfers, all flowing out of my accounts and into the life my daughter and son-in-law had built. The mortgage top up when they bought the house in Brentwood and came up short at closing. The car insurance on both of their vehicles because my son-in-law had 2 speeding tickets and could not get a reasonable rate on his own. The private school tuition for my granddaughter because the public school in their district was, according to my daughter, not the right environment. The meal kit delivery service. The landscaping. The dog grooming appointments for a dog I had met exactly twice. A gym membership in my daughter's name that charged $62 a month and had, as far as I could tell from the statements, never once been used. I added the monthly total 3 times to make sure I had not made an error. I had not. It was more than my entire nursing pension. I sat with that for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. The light above me flickered once. Outside, a car moved slowly down the street, its headlights sweeping across the curtains like something searching. I thought about the conversation that afternoon. Curated, intimate. Better if you celebrated separately. In the house I had never been invited to stay overnight in. At the table I had helped furnish. For a holiday that my mother had taught me was about gathering, not sorting. My hands stopped shaking somewhere around 1 in the morning. I closed the folder. I did not put it back in the drawer. I left it on the table, because I knew I would need it the next day. First Baptist Savings on Kingston Pike had been my bank since 1987. I had opened my first account there when I was 26 years old, 3 weeks after I passed my nursing boards and received my first real paycheck. The branch manager now was a man named Arthur Baines, who had gray at his temples and the kind of steady voice that made difficult conversations feel manageable. I arrived at 9 the next morning with the green folder under my arm. Arthur came out to greet me himself, which told me the teller had already called back to warn him that I looked the way people look when something serious has happened. "Helen," he said, shaking my hand with both of his. "Come on in." I sat across from him and opened the folder without preamble. "I need to cancel every automatic transfer and recurring payment that is not a utility in my name or a direct expense for this address," I said. "All of them. Today." Arthur looked at the stack of papers. He did not flinch. That was one reason I had stayed with this bank for nearly 4 decades. How many are we talking about? He asked. 87. He exhaled slowly through his nose. That will cause some immediate disruptions. Yes, I said, that is the intention. He began pulling up accounts on a screen. His brow creased once, then twice. Then he went very still. Helen, he said carefully, are you aware that there was an attempt last week to add an authorized user to your home equity line of credit? I felt the floor tilt slightly beneath me. I was not. The request was submitted online. The name entered was Stephanie Boss, my daughter's married name. Arthur turned the screen so I could see the flag notification. The attempt had been made on a Tuesday morning. I had spoken to my daughter that Tuesday afternoon. She had called to ask if I had the number for the pest control company she liked, the one I paid for, and we had talked for 11 minutes about nothing in particular. She had sounded perfectly normal. Was it approved? I asked. No. It triggered our secondary verification protocol because the request came from a device we had no history with, and the answers to the security questions did not match your file. He paused. This was not an accident, Helen. Someone was testing access. I sat with my hands flat on the edge of his desk. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Freeze everything, I said. The equity line, the investment account, the joint savings I still have from my late husband. All of it. And change every security question. Change the answers too. I will give you new ones today. Of course. Arthur was already typing. I would also recommend placing a fraud alert with the credit bureaus. I can walk you through that now if you would like. Please. As we worked through the paperwork, my hands did not shake. My voice did not catch. I felt strangely, the way I used to feel in the middle of a long hospital shift when something went wrong and the treating took over. That cool, focused clarity that has nothing to do with calm and everything to do with knowing exactly what the next step must be. When I walked out an hour later, the autumn sun was bright enough to make me squint. The air was sharp, the way Tennessee air gets in November, clean and cold and honest. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and breathed it in. The storm was already starting. I could feel it the way you feel weather coming before it arrives. By the time I reached home, my phone had begun. The first message was from my daughter, sent at 10:47 in the morning. Mom, the landscaping company says the payment was declined. Can you check your card? I set the phone on the counter. The second message came at 11:15. Also, the school portal is showing a balance due. It's probably just a glitch, but can you call them? I made a cup of tea. The third message arrived at 11:49, and the tone it shifted in the way a sky shifts before a storm. Still light, but different. Mom, I'm getting a lot of notifications. What's going on? Call me. I did not call. I went out to the backyard instead. I had a row of azaleas along the back fence that needed cutting back before winter, and I had been meaning to get to them for 2 weeks. I put on my garden gloves and worked slowly and deliberately, clipping each branch with care, letting the pile grow at my feet. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket continuously for the next 2 hours. I let it. By late afternoon, the messages from my daughter had been joined by messages from my son-in-law, Garrett. His tone started impatient and moved quickly to something that stopped just short of threatening. Helen, the mortgage autopay bounced. Do you realize what this means for our credit? Fix this tonight. Helen, you need to call me. This is serious. This is unacceptable. We have a family to run. I read each one. Then I set the phone face down on the kitchen table and cooked myself dinner. A real dinner. Chicken with roasted carrots and a biscuit made from scratch. Things I used to make before I became too tired and too depleted to cook for just myself. I ate slowly. I washed my own dish. That night, the last message I read before I turned off the phone was from my daughter. If you think cutting us off is going to make us feel bad, it's not. It's just cruel. We didn't do anything to deserve this. You are punishing your grandchildren. I turned the phone off. I had learned in 31 years of nursing that people in crisis reach for the nearest lever. Guilt is the nearest lever for mothers. My daughter had known that her whole life. But something had changed in me the night she used the word curated. Something had quietly, permanently shifted. I slept better than I had in years. The confrontation came on a Saturday, 4 days later. I heard Garrett's truck before I saw it, the engine running hard the way it did when he was in a hurry. He parked at an angle in my driveway, which told me everything I needed to know about his state of mind. My daughter came in first. She was wearing the camel coat she had bought last winter, the one that cost more than my monthly electric bill, and her face had the tight, careful look of someone who had rehearsed the conversation in the car on the way over. Garrett came in behind her. He was a tall man, broad in the shoulders, the kind of man who fills a room with physical presence before he says a word. He had used that effectively for years. Mom, my daughter's voice was controlled. We need to talk about what you've done. Sit down, I said. I had made coffee. I had set out 3 cups. I was not going to be rushed. Garrett did not sit. He stood in the center of my kitchen, which I had always found was his preference. Standing meant he controlled the geometry of the room. Do you have any idea what you've put us through this week? He said. The school called. The mortgage company called. We had to scramble to cover things we've never had to think about. Do you know how humiliating that is? I looked at him steadily. I know something about humiliation, Garrett. He stopped. I know what it feels like to be told you are not welcome at your own family's Thanksgiving table. I know what it feels like to drive home with a dish of food you made for people who decided you were too ordinary for their curated evening. I kept my voice even. I know what it feels like to get into bed that night and realize you have been paying for the house where they wouldn't let you eat. My daughter's expression faltered. That was not. I have the folder, I said. I placed it on the table between us. 87 payments. 87 things I've been covering while my kitchen grout crumbles and my ceiling fan wobbles and I ration whether I can afford a new pair of shoes this season. I let that land. You both earn 6-figure salaries. You take 2 vacations a year. You just remodeled the guest bathroom with heated floors. And you have been letting me pay for your landscaper. Garrett's jaw tightened. You offered. I offered. Once. Years ago. For the down payment shortfall. That was a gift, freely given. What happened after that was something else. My daughter sat down. She looked smaller suddenly, which happened sometimes when the armor came off. Mom, she said quietly, we got used to it. I know you did, I said. That is the problem. A silence opened up in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The ceiling fan wobbled twice. Garrett crossed his arms. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted into something harder. You know Stephanie reached out to a lawyer. I did not change my expression. Did she? A financial elder law attorney. She wants to know what options we have, given that you've disrupted our household without warning. She is welcome to consult whoever she chooses, I said. I have consulted Arthur Baines at First Baptist Savings, who has already placed fraud alerts on every account I own, including the home equity line your wife attempted to access last Tuesday without my knowledge. The color left Garrett's face so completely that for a moment I thought he might need to sit down. My daughter made a sound that was not quite a word. The bank flagged it, I said. The attempt did not succeed, but it is documented, every detail of it. Stephanie? Garrett turned to look at her. She did not look at him. I was going to talk to you about it, she said very quietly. It was just exploratory. It was unauthorized access to my financial accounts, I said. Whatever it was beyond that is between the two of you. Garrett sat down then. He sat down heavily, the way a man sits when the ground has gone uncertain beneath him. I need you both to hear me clearly, I said. I am not doing this out of spite. I am doing this because I finally looked at the number. I finally sat down with the full picture in front of me, and I understood that I had confused love with rescue. I thought that giving was the same as belonging. It is not. My daughter looked up. Her eyes were wet. I still love you, I said. I love your children. I want to be part of this family. But I cannot be part of it as a financial system that runs quietly in the background. I will not be that. Neither of them spoke for a long time. When they left, my daughter hugged me at the door. It was brief and slightly stiff, the way hugs are, when people don't know yet how to stand in a new arrangement. But she did it. Garrett walked to the truck without looking back. I stood on my porch and watched them go. The house behind me was quiet and entirely mine. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The silence from my daughter's household was not complete, but it was different. The messages slowed, then stopped being about money, and started being cautious, occasional, like someone testing ice before they step onto it. Word had gotten around in the way that word does in the communities of women who have known each other for a long time. My friend Joyce, who I had met during our years at the hospital, called to tell me she had run into my daughter at the grocery store. She looked thinner, Joyce said. Tired. I received that information without comment. My neighbor Ernest told me he had seen a for sale sign go up in front of a house 2 streets over, the same street where Garrett had been paying for a storage unit out of what, I now understood, had been my money. Things were adjusting, quietly, unpleasantly, necessarily. My granddaughter called me on a Wednesday night, which surprised me. She was 15, old enough to have her own phone, young enough that adults rarely occurred to her as people worth calling voluntarily. Her name was Bree, and she had my mother's stubborn chin and her father's tendency to lead with her feelings before she had figured out what they were. "Grandma," she said, "are you okay?" "I am very okay," I told her. "Are you?" A pause. "It's weird at home right now." "I imagine it is." Another pause. "Dad keeps saying you did something wrong." But I looked at that folder, the one Dad brought home and left on the counter. Her voice was careful, feeling its way. "Grandma, we were really expensive." I almost smiled. "Yes." "Why did you pay for all of it?" I thought about how to answer that honestly without making it more than a 15-year-old needed to carry. "Because I loved your mother," I said, "and because I made the mistake of thinking that if I kept solving problems, people would stop having them. That is not how it works." Bree was quiet for a moment. "Mom cried this morning, like actually cried. I haven't seen her do that in a long time. Sometimes people need to feel the weight of things before they understand what they've been carrying." "I don't want to be like that," she said. "I don't want someone else to always fix things for me." "You won't be," I said. I can already tell." She exhaled. "Can I come see you this weekend?" "I will make waffles," I told her. "Okay." A small pause. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, Bug." After I hung up, I sat in the living room in the dark for a while, not the heavy dark of 3 weeks ago. A different kind, soft and still, the kind that asks nothing of you. The following month, something arrived that I had not expected. My daughter came alone. No Garrett, no prepared speech. She pulled up in the older car, not the new one, and she knocked instead of walking in. I opened the door. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater, the kind of clothes she wore when she was not performing anything for anyone. Her hair was back in a ponytail. She looked like the girl she used to be, before she learned to want things at scale. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table. I made coffee. She wrapped her hands around the mug the way people do when they need something solid to hold. "Garrett and I have been talking," she began. "Really talking. Not just about money. About how we got here." She stared at the surface of the coffee. "He admitted that we let things get out of hand. That we were building a life we hadn't actually built. We were just standing in front of it." I did not say anything. I let her find her words. "I'm ashamed," she said, and the word came out flat and plain, the way true things do when people stop decorating them. "Not just about the equity line. About all of it. About Thanksgiving." Her voice cracked on that one. "You brought a casserole, Mom. You came to my door with food you made for me, and I told you it wasn't the right night." "You did," I said. I keep thinking about the light going off on the porch. I had not told her about the porch light, which meant she knew. Had always known perhaps that some line had been crossed there, in the dark, before I reached my car. "I didn't turn it off," she said quickly. "Garrett did. He didn't even think. He just reached over and flipped the switch." She closed her eyes briefly. "I didn't say anything. And I should have." We sat with that for a moment. "What happened to you and Garrett," I said carefully, "is between you and him. But what happened between you and me? That is what I need us to work on." She nodded. "I know. I want to." She looked up. "I don't know how to start." "You already did," I said. "You knocked." We talked for 2 hours. Not about finances. About other things. About other things. About her father, my late husband Robert, whose watch I still kept on the nightstand. About the early years when she was small and we were not wealthy, but we were close, and close had been enough. About what she was afraid of now, the debt, the reductions, the social adjustments, the slow process of learning to live within edges that were actually hers. It was not a resolution, it was a beginning, which is a more honest thing. When she left, she hugged me properly, long and without hurry. I stood at the window and watched her car until the taillights disappeared around the corner. That evening, I did something I had been putting off for 2 years. I called a contractor named Pete Holloway, who had done good work for my neighbor, and I scheduled an estimate for the kitchen. New grout. A new overhead light fixture. and a ceiling fan, one that didn't wobble, in a color I actually liked. I also ordered a new coat, burgundy wool blend, the kind of coat that costs enough to mean something. It arrived 4 days later in a flat brown box, and I tried it on in the hallway mirror and decided I looked exactly like a woman who had figured something important out. I wore it to church that Sunday and to Joyce's house for dinner the following Friday. The green folder was still on my kitchen counter. I had not put it away. One afternoon in early December, I finally picked it up. I stood over the recycling bin for a moment, feeling the weight of it. 4 years of statements, receipts, transfers, all the small surrenders I had made without naming them. Then I set it in the bin and pressed the lid closed. The kitchen felt lighter immediately, or maybe I did. I went back to the counter and started mixing a batch of cornbread for no particular reason except that I wanted some. The radio was on, something slow and good from a station I liked. Outside, the first real cold of winter had arrived, the kind that frosts the grass overnight and makes the morning air smell clean. I thought about Bree, about the waffles I'd make when she visited, about the look on her face when she'd said she didn't want to be like that. I thought about my daughter, sitting across the table from me with both hands around a coffee mug, saying the word ashamed, the way you say something you have not said out loud before. I thought about Garrett, who had not called or come by. That was fine. Some people need more time to find the door. Some people need to lose more before they understand what they were standing on. I was not waiting for him. I was not waiting for anything. The cornbread went into the oven. The timer ticked. The frost on the window caught the kitchen light and turned it into something almost pretty. I had worked 31 years to take care of other people, and I had done it well. I knew how to read a room, hold a hand, say the right thing at the wrong moment, and the wrong thing at exactly the right moment. I knew how to stay calm when things went sideways and how to find the still point in the middle of a crisis. What I had not known until recently was how to do any of that for myself. The timer went off. I pulled the cornbread from the oven and cut myself a piece before it had fully cooled, the way you're not supposed to, the way I always wanted to when no one was watching. It was warm and a little crumbly and entirely mine. That, I thought, setting down the fork, is what it feels like to finally come home to yourself. I still think about that casserole dish sitting on my kitchen counter, warm when I set it down and cold by the time I finally thought to put it away. That is what it looks like when you've been giving so long you stop noticing the cost. The dish goes cold, the kitchen grout crumbles, the ceiling fan wobbles, and you keep telling yourself it is fine, that this is just what love looks like, that someday the people you have been holding up will turn around and hold something for you in return. They did not turn around, not until I stopped. That is the part I had to sit with, not the anger, not the betrayal, not even the word curated, though I will probably hear that word in a particular tone for the rest of my life. What I had to sit with was the understanding that I had participated in this. Every automatic transfer I set up, every bill I quietly absorbed, every time I told myself it was just this once. I was teaching my daughter and her husband something. I was teaching them that there were no edges, that the floor of their life would always hold because I was underneath it, invisible and load-bearing, never asking to be seen. What I did not understand for a long time is that genuine love has to have edges, not walls, edges. The kind that say, this is where I end and you begin. The kind that ask another person to stand in their own weight. I thought boundaries were a form of withholding. I had it exactly backwards. The most honest thing I ever did for my daughter was the hardest thing I ever did for her. And I had to be smart about it. I had to be clear-eyed in a way I had been avoiding for years. Opening that green folder, laying out 87 pages on my kitchen table, adding the numbers 3 times to be sure. That was not cruelty. That was finally paying attention. I had spent decades being emotionally present and financially unconscious, and that combination had cost me more than money. It had cost me a ceiling fan that didn't wobble. It had cost me a coat I actually liked. It had cost me a coat I actually liked. It had cost me whole years of feeling at home in my own life. Bree gave me something I did not expect. She called on a Wednesday night just to ask if I was okay, and then she said, quietly, that she did not want to be like that. 15 years old, and she already understood something it took me until 63 to fully accept, that there is no dignity in being permanently rescued, and there is no love in doing the rescuing indefinitely. She is going to be all right. More than all right. She is going to be the kind of person who built something real and knows what it cost her, and that knowledge will be worth more than anything I could have handed her. The cornbread I made that December evening was not a grand gesture. It was just cornbread. But I made it because I wanted it on a Tuesday afternoon, for no reason except that the kitchen smelled good and the radio was playing something I liked. That was new. That was mine. You cannot pour from an empty cup. I always knew that saying. I just never applied it to myself. I thought it was for other people, younger people, people who had not yet learned to manage on empty. But the saying does not have an age limit, and the cup does not care how long you have been running on fumes. I came home to myself in stages. First the bank, then the folder in the recycling bin, then the coat, the contractor, the cornbread. Each one a small act of returning. Each one a small act of returning. Each one a proof that it was not too late to belong to my own life again. It is never too late. That is the thing I most want anyone who is sitting where I was sitting to hear. The folder is in the bin. The fan is steady. The kitchen is warm. Come home.